and welcome to another edition of the Simsbury Woman. Thanks so much for joining us. Today I am thrilled to have one of our elected officials in town, Selectman Lisa Heavner, has joined us, and we're going to be talking a little bit about her role in town government and the upcoming budget season, which is always on everyone's mind. So Lisa, thanks very much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Shannon.
Absolutely. So let's start with you. Let's talk about the personal side of you. What brought you to Simsbury? What have you been doing in the community? Your family, that sort of thing.
Oh, sure. We came to Simsbury about 11 years ago when we were living in Maryland, and Jim was offered a job in Connecticut through the Hartford. And so like so many people in Simsbury, we came up for job placement, and we fell in love with the area. We toured West Hartford, we looked at Simsbury, we looked at Avon, we looked at Farmington, and Simsbury felt like home. So we ended up settling here. We have two boys, as you know. Mm-hmm. I've got Rob, who's a junior at Kenyon College in Ohio, and Mike, who is a freshman at Washington University in St. Louis.
So you've gone through the school systems, and now you're an empty nester.
Yes. Yes, it's hard to believe, but yeah.
So more time to be involved in all the things that you do in town. So speaking of which, how did you get into government?
Well, it's kind of funny because I did grow up my whole life in Maryland, and where everything is focused on politics. Mm-hmm. The whole world down there is politics. Everyone knows what party you belong to. That's all people talk about. And I actually didn't like that. So we were relieved to come to Connecticut and not be a part of that. And then I ended up in politics. But I ended up there accidentally. I was president of the PTC at Henry James accidentally. Susan Salina was president, and then she joined the Board of Ed, and they were desperately seeking someone, so I just said, oh, I'll fill in for her. Mm-hmm. And I did that, and it was through that position that I met Mary Glassman. And one day on a lacrosse field, I ran into her, and she goes to me, why don't you run for the Board of Selectmen? And of course I said no. That's like the craziest idea I've ever heard. And she said, well, why don't you join me for a cup of coffee? And so I did, and she said, Lisa, why are you so reluctant to run for office? It's no different than what you've been doing your whole life, which is volunteering in the community. You volunteer in the schools, you mm-hmm. volunteered at the temple, and now I just asking you to transfer all the skills you learned doing those to the town level. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, you don't have to be political. Just go in there and do what you've always done. And when she described it like that, I thought,
that's a different perspective. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's one that I think a lot of us forget about. Mm-hmm. That there's especially at the local level, it's not very political.
Right.
You can just get in there and try and make your community better, mm-hmm. and you don't have to deal with the politics. It's an unpaid job, so you're not dependent on it for your financial being.
Right. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about local government and what is the role of the Board of Selectmen for those in the audience who are unsure.
Well, the Board of Selectmen is the legislature of the town of Simsbury, and there are 6 of us. One of them is the first selectman, mm-hmm. and the first selectman, it's sort of unusual in government, serves as both a legislator and the executive director, and that's unusual. Usually there's a separation of powers, but mm-hmm. in our case, the first selectman serves as the executive and the legislature, and so there are 6 of us total, including the first selectman. Mm-hmm.
And so, as we start to kind of evolve into our discussion on the budget, what is the Board of Selectmen's budget? What are the responsibilities of the Board of Selectmen financially?
The Board of Selectmen is the budget making authority for the town of Simsbury, and I think people don't realize that the town of Simsbury is separate from the Board of Ed, and so we do only the town budget. And mm-hmm. and people, it's funny when you ask people, well, what is the town budget? Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. And it's basically your police. That's public works, so roads, plowing. Social services, the library, the senior center, Simsbury Farms, and then if you apply for a marriage license, all the fees or building permit. So that's what we do, and that's only about 25% of mm-hmm. Every tax dollar that goes to the town goes to our budget. So we only control 25%. Translated into the mill rate, our budget is really only 7 mills. Right. The rest of it, 73%, goes to the Board of Education. Mm-hmm. So for every $10 you pay in taxes, 7 goes to the Board of Ed. Mm-hmm. And then the rest goes to debt, retirement, the fire district, and non-public schools. Mm-hmm.
And I think you make an important point. And I would agree that people don't understand the distinctions between the town budget and the Board of Education budget per se. And I think that's even more of a reason for people to get involved in local government and serve on boards and commissions or ask questions. Do you find that people are engaged or willing to explore a little bit more, learn more about what the government does in town?
Well, when I talk with them one-on-one, absolutely. And going into the high school and doing the civics classes, absolutely. When I do door knock, when you run for election, that's one of the best ways to sort of get in touch with the public and sort of see what's on their mind, and what's on everyone's mind is taxes. But the interesting thing is only 7% of registered voters voted in the last referendum. So while people are upset about taxes, they're not exercising their voice and vote when it comes to voting on the budget. And while it is the Board of Selectmen's budget and the Board of Ed's budget that get presented to the people, after referendum, it is the people's budget.
7% is shocking.
I think it was 7.4, but yes.
But still, 7-ish% is shocking. And unfortunate, I think, because you're right, there are those who are concerned about taxes, but not perhaps exercising the right to.
I mean, in some ways, you could look at this in many different ways. I'd take the positive spin that for the most part, people are happy with the way things are going, and they're comfortable just sort of letting it ride. I think if people were upset, we would see the numbers go up. But the interesting thing is that your local budgets, as opposed to the state or the federal budgets, touch your lives much, much more than what happens at the state or federal level, because it's your kids' schools. Are your roads being paved? Your police, are you safe? And the other thing that's sort of interesting about local budgets is that, and I think people forget this, is you can actually make a difference. You can call your legislators. We're all in the phone book. Truthfully, you're going to run into most of us at Fitzgerald's or the gas station or just around town. And we all listen to what you have to say. Whereas the higher up you get, the less accessible your representatives are. But at the local level, it's just your neighbor.
Excellent. That's a good point. So let's talk about the budget, because this is budget season. Now, the Board of Selectmen is beginning the budget workshop process. So tell me where things are right now.
Sure. Well, the way the budget process works is the first selectman, which is Mary Glassman, goes to her department heads and asks them to come in with their proposed budgets. And that has been done, and their proposal, I think, came in around 3.9% increase. And then Mary works with the department budgets to get those increases more in line with what we think the Board of Finance is going to think is acceptable. And she adopts her own budget, which she presented to us last night. And she came in with a 1.57% increase, and which I think is a very good initial budget. And then we are now in the process of reviewing her budget line by line, and we will make adjustments, add additions or subtractions. But one of the things she stated when she presented her budget is that her top priority is not to raise taxes. And so the question is, well, how can you not raise taxes if you are presenting a 1.57 budget? But as you know, having worked on the budget last year with us, again, this is something that I think we could do a better job explaining to the public. Yes, budgets are major drivers of your taxes, but they're not the only drivers.
Correct.
And
well, and I think, to that point, we are coming out of an economic low point. The state has had financial crises. So when you put all of those things together, nothing happens in isolation.
Correct,
So how has the state financial situation and the country's financial situation impacted Simsbury?
Well, like everywhere else, we saw slow growth since 2008, but for the first time, we're really thrilled to report that we're seeing substantial growth in our, for the first time in really almost 6 years. In our grand list, we're seeing a 5.66% increase in growth, which translates to, I think, about a $500,000 increase in taxes. So that's one of the drivers. So yes, our budget went up, but our grand list went up, so we have more revenue. The other thing the town did is we've looked for savings with the Board of Ed and consolidated our health care. And again, that will bring the town about another $500,000 in savings. So even though our budget increased, the amount of savings we've been able to find for our residents has been tremendous and will allow us to keep taxes flat at a 157.
Right. Now you kind of touched on some of this consolidation and resource sharing, and those are kind of buzzwords around budgets and talks about economics. So how have you guys done that? How have you worked with the Board of Ed, and how have you consolidated within the town?
Well, the first thing we did is we looked at our healthcare providers, and we had two, and we found that if we consolidated into one provider, there would be a tremendous amount of savings, and we want to thank and congratulate our town employees who had to agree to this as well, because they will get excellent coverage, but we'll get the tremendous savings. So that's one thing we did. The other thing we've done is we started the technology committee. Mm-hmm. That's new within, I think, the last 2 years, headed by Pam Lacko, and we have brought together town and Board of Ed employees and members to sort of look, are there opportunities for savings there? And you'll see in this year's budget a proposal to roll out fiber for the town, which is it's kind of the base you need to grow the town into the future and be connected to other towns and get cost savings down the line. But we were able to find savings working with the Board of Ed there. So those are two huge initiatives that we're excited to do. And it's really just a matter of hard work, getting together, talking it through, seeing where the opportunities are and where the obstacles are.
Right. And from my recollection, the town has been very conservative as far as replacing equipment or buying new equipment. So, and I know that we were coming to a kind of a crossroads where things were going to need to be replaced. So how do you work to make sure that you're providing the services that you need to provide while still being cost effective?
Well, I think that's a great question. And as you know, our budgets have been so conservative, the most conservative probably in the town's history for the last 6 years. But as you know, like everyone knows, costs for the town have gone up just like they do for individual families, utilities and stuff like that. So that has meant consolidating and working on services. But when we approach a budget, we sort of look at it in 3 tiers. And the first tier are must spends, and those are contractual obligations we have with our employees. You got to pay the bills and core services. And then we look at should spends, and we look at, okay, if we do maintenance now, paint the house, will we have cost savings later on? Yes, because then you don't have to replace the siding. Or you look at another should spend is if we invest now, will this lead to long-term savings down the line? And that's sort of what the fiber rollout is for the opportunities it will create. And then the last you look for is want-to spends. And those are things that we look at, not just new services, but services we provide that we think our residents want. And of course, as you know, the devil is in the details, and not everyone agrees what goes in what budget. But that's sort of the framework of how we look at the budget.
Okay. And so so you start there, and the first selectman has received budgets from all the department heads, and then you go through line by line and evaluate what is being asked. And so, what's the next step after that?
Well, during that process, Mary, to get to 157, had to do cuts from department heads, and they use this as their opportunity to go to the Board of Selectmen and say, can you reconsider this? And so we create wish lists for the different departments. Someone will say, well, I know this was cut to get the 157, but we think it should be added back in. Can you put this on a consideration list? And we get all the department heads, and then we look at it together. And what we could do is go from 157 to a higher amount, or we could take some of the priorities that the departments had and said, yes, we view this as necessary to include in the budget, but we're not willing to go above 157, so we're going to have to look for cuts elsewhere. And that's definitely the hardest thing to do. Because while you as a selectman may view something as a must or should spend or want to spend, somebody else may view it differently, and it's a difficult choice to make.
And what kind of support do you anticipate, if you can anticipate, getting from the state of Connecticut?
At this point, we're anticipating basically steady support. We're not hearing. I haven't heard of any declines right now. So we're still at a hold harmless, but a hold harmless is really a decrease. I know the Board of Ed got a little bump in educational cost sharing, but it's minimal. And there hasn't really been any for a substantial number of years. And the interesting thing about that is when you put the majority of the burden to pay education on the municipal governments, we are only allowed to tax people on property, and that's a regressive tax.
Right.
It doesn't care if you're a senior living on a fixed income or if you've lost your job.
Right.
And the educational cost sharing we get is a more progressive tax because it does care about your state taxes are determined by how much income you earn.
Right.
So it's kind of a strange way to to fund it, and because we haven't seen it increase, more of the burden is falling on the homeowners.
Right.
And
Right.
that's as you know, a challenge to our seniors and
Right. People on fixed incomes. It makes it very difficult to stay,
it does
live here,
It does.
where you want to live.
Right.
Okay, so after the, what's the next step in the process? After the department heads kind of advocate for their wish lists and come back to the Board of Selectmen, and there's some sort of juxtapositioning.
Yes,
then.
we go back and forth, and then eventually we'll make a decision. We'll do that, and also on capital projects.
Right.
We'll sort of look what's coming down the road there and what we want to forward to the Board of Finance. But once we're done with our budget, it then goes to the Board of Finance for
Right.
final review. It's actually the Board of Finance budget they put forward to the town at referendum. And they have put forward, they've requested both the town and Board of Ed to put forward budgets that show 1 or a 0.5% increase.
Wow.
And so we will outline for them what additional cuts we would make to get to 1.
Okay. Go back for a second and explain what a capital project is and what some of our capital projects may be down the road.
Okay, well, capital projects are building. It's what you build.
Right.
And what you bond for, because you can either pay cash for capital projects or you can bond. And then part of our budget is then the debt retirement. How do you pay for that? And the Board of Finance has a guideline that it shouldn't be more than 7% of the total budget. So that limits what you can do, which is
Right.
not a bad thing because you shouldn't spend more than you have.
Right.
But it does make it a challenge. Like one of the things that after Newtown that the schools want to do, and I think is a great idea, is to make sure that the main offices at Squadron and Henry James are more towards the front of the building, so as a visitor comes in, they're met immediately by
Right.
staff instead of having to go down a long hall.
Right.
It's a safety issue.
Right.
So those are two projects that are on, and oftentimes it's something as simple as replacing a roof or
Right.
doing sewer upgrades.
Right. And the modifications that are projected for Henry James, when are those starting?
Well, the safety aspects would be for next year.
Okay.
And then they want to upgrade the science buildings, and that's a little further down the line. So that project was broken up into 2.
Okay.
If you're going to ask me more details, I got to get my book.
No, it's okay. It's okay. No. I just wanted to give people an understanding of the distinctions in the pieces of the budget,
Yeah.
that it's not just one lump
Right.
pile of figures and numbers, that there's a certain amount of planning for the future as well, that over a period of time.
5 years, yeah.
Right.
We put things on the capital plan. We only vote on the upcoming year what we're going to do, but we put things on for 5 years so that the public has an opportunity to sort of see where we're going.
Right.
And sometimes things come up, like a roof has a catastrophic failure, and we got to do this now, and we'll put something else off. But it helps us prioritize and guide what we're going to do over the future.
Or school safety issues. That
Right.
was, something that unfortunately became something that had to be done.
And actually, yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because the Board of Ed had initially on their capital project put off the Squadron line improvements, but at their Board of Education meeting, they voted to include it in this year's budget. So you're right, things do change, priorities change, and you have to be flexible, but it still gives us a guideline.
Right, absolutely. And exactly, you have to have some sort of path,
Right.
direction in which
Exactly.
you're going. So, okay, so we've covered capital projects. Are there other aspects of the budget that we haven't gotten into yet?
No, those are the main ones. I
Okay.
mean, debt service, but that's that will be determined by what capital projects we do. And then there's the non-public school budget, which are basically buses and nurses at private schools. And then there's the fire district. People don't realize that actually the fire district is its own taxing district, and it's not related to the town or the Board of Ed. But that's a tiny portion of your taxes.
Okay, so, okay. All right, good. Just wanted to make sure we covered everything. All right, so then after we have finished these negotiations with all the department heads, we go to referendum.
Well, first we go to the Board of Finance.
Oh, right.
Which
right.
you
sort
have
of
come to,
mentioned,
right?
Yeah.
Yes. And there's an opportunity for the public to review the budgets, look at them, and comment on them,
Okay,
because we
good.
want to make sure the public has an opportunity to comment. And the Board of Finance doesn't generally do public audience,
Right.
so this is one of the rare times that they do. So I encourage people to go take a look. We will be posting our budgets online.
Good.
So that the public has an opportunity to review it. Some of it is right now posted, but you have to go to the finance department to find it. So if you're looking for it
Okay.
online, go to the finance department. And the Board of Ed also posts there. So we try to be as transparent as we can.
I think that's really important to note, that the Board of Finance is opening channels of communication for people to voice their opinions, and I certainly hope that people take advantage of that opportunity.
And it makes a difference
It
because
does.
we are in a small town and we care what our neighbors have to say. So you really can, one person can make a difference. And if you can't make the meeting, it is also okay to email folks and let them know what you're thinking.
Right, or stop them in Fitzgerald's.
Or stop them in Fitzgerald's, or pick up the phone and call them.
Exactly.
We're all listed, although I don't have anyone in the schools. I used to say I'm always listed in your kid's school directory. No, I'm an empty nester and I'm not, but
Right, right.
but we're still very easy to find.
Good, yes. All right, so after we've passed through the Board of Finance, then we move on to referendum, which is usually in early May.
Right.
Okay, and so hopefully we can get people to turn out, maybe have a higher voting rate than 7%.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. This is your tax dollars. It becomes your budget, not just the Board of Selectmen budget. It becomes all our budgets at referendum, and it's a great opportunity to take a look at how are we spending our money. I mean, the great thing about Simsbury, people always say, well, Simsbury has high taxes, and of course, we all feel that.
Right, we do.
But the question, when I door knock on people, I always say, but are you getting value
Right.
for your money? And anyone who has children in the schools, for certain, answers yes. We have some of the best schools in the state. For those who like the outdoors, the answer is yes. This town, through votes, not just through opinion, has shown its commitment to open space. And we actually have 33% of our land as open space, which is a wonderful thing.
Right,
But if people wonder why we can't develop,
right. That's a catch-22.
it's a catch-22. But through our votes, we know that that's valued by
right.
the people who move here,
Right.
because they continue to vote for it, and
Right.
and we enjoy that beauty every day. So we live in one of the most beautiful towns and have some of the best education. And there's an old adage, you get what you pay for.
Exactly.
And we moved here because we liked what you get.
Exactly.
And the recreation, Simsbury Farms, the library. It's just a wonderful place to raise a family. That said, we do work very hard to be conservative in our budgeting,
Right.
because we know. And we're looking to grow to the extent we can, our tax base
Right.
in very
course.
thoughtful ways.
Of course, of course. We're going to start wrapping up shortly, but I just want to touch on, we've kind of touched on it here and there, about the importance of having a voice and the importance of being involved. And I'm a strong believer in that. I know you are as well. What can we do as a community to make sure that we're telling our friends and neighbors, this is important? How do we really convey how important it is? That's a $1 million question, I guess.
And it's a great question. I think the thing is, people often feel like, well, if I say something, it won't make a difference. And at the higher up you go, that's probably true. But at the local level, it's not true. You can call. I love it when someone calls me and say, hey, have you considered looking at this problem in this light? And if it's something I hadn't considered, it really broadens my appreciation of the issue I'm studying. And it can change my opinion. And I think all members of the Board of Selectmen feel that way. And we're all accessible. We're there. This is local stuff that touches your life in every way. So the most important thing is tell your friends to vote. It matters. And if they're not sure what they're
Right.
voting on, pick up the phone.
Right,
We're
exactly.
happy to sit down over a cup. I love coffee. We'll sit down and
Right.
talk with you and
Right.
explain any issues that are, you
Right.
know, and you shouldn't feel intimidated to do that, because I didn't know much about local
Right.
town government until I ran.
I think people do feel intimidated. I think that's the right word. But it's really as simple as you're saying, you know, having a conversation in Fitzgerald's or at Starbucks or whatever. It's an easy thing to do if you can kind of get over that intimidation.
Yeah, and
Because we are just friends and neighbors.
yeah, we just live next door. We're worried about the same things everyone else is worried about. How
Right.
are we going to pay for retirement? You know, pay for our children's education in college.
Right.
And
Right. And just to kind of wrap up, because this is a show called The Simsbury Woman, let's just briefly touch upon the importance of women being involved in local government or government in general.
I think it's hugely important. I think women at throughout our history, it's been mostly dominated by men. And I can understand why. It can be a little rough and tumble at times, although less so on the local level, more. But what we see on television is sort of the more rough and tumble than what happens at the local level.
Right.
And but the fact is, women have an important voice to add and a perspective that they need to come to the table and
Absolutely.
share their concerns, because a lot of, especially at the local level, a lot of it's education. It affects the children, and in this society, probably women still carry a large burden of the childbearing, although that's changing, and we're glad to see it's changing. The men are participating quite a bit more, but it's still, if you go to the schools, it's still the women who are volunteering.
Right.
And these are the things where you can make a change on your child's education.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I obviously share that thought, but it's important to state, I think, over and over again, that women have to have a seat at the table. I think that was put perfectly. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that. And we'll look forward to following the budget process over the next couple of months, and we will put up a graphic for the website so people can take a look at the budget and see how things are tracking.
Yes, and if anyone has questions, they can call me. I'm in the phone book.
You're in the book. All right. Thank you, Lisa.
All right, thanks, Shannon.
Thank you for joining us on another edition of The Simsbury Woman. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.